Hi, boys and girls. We are going to do our first lesson on poetry today. And I decided what I'd do is put the poetry lessons on a slideshow. So this is number one. And you can see I only have 4 slides over here. I want you to notice that the teaching slides are blue. So this is going to give you the topic. And then this is going to help you understand what you're supposed to be doing. And then the last slide's a different color. That way you know we're at the end. And it will also give you some directions on what you're supposed to do with the lesson that you just learned. So let's go ahead and get started on elements of poetry. I'm going to present this screen, and we'll get started with our slideshow. Poetry is a special kind of writing. It uses not only words, like all our authors use, but it also has a certain form, it has a certain rhythm, it has a certain pattern. So we're going to take a look at some of those elements today. So let's go to slide 2. And here's my chart. Yay, charts. So on this chart, you're going to see some of the elements of poetry. Not all of them. There are many, but we're just going to start off with a few that I want you to notice as we're looking through this. So here's a line break. And what does that mean? Where each line of the text ends in the poem. There are a group of lines in the poem are called a stanza. An element of poetry would be rhythm and rhyme, a pattern of stressed syllables or rhyming words. Figurative language. And we know a lot about figurative language. We've been practicing and studying this all year. So most poems contain metaphors, similes, personification, hyperboles, idioms, on and on and on. And so we're going to be looking at some of those today. Poetry can be silly or serious. Poetry can express feelings. And I have that in parentheses, the mood. There's a mood to poetry. Sometimes you feel sad when you read a poem, and sometimes you feel kind of silly when you read them. So there's a mood set with poetry. Short or long. I've seen really short poems, maybe 2 lines, and I've seen very long poems, a page or 2, sometimes even a book. Poetry can be about anything. Also, poetry tells a story, and that is the truth. Authors want to tell a story when they're writing poetry too. And guess what, everybody? Poetry's fun. Yay! You're going to have fun with this poetry unit. It's one of my favorites. So let's go on to look at a poem that I think you're all very familiar with because, well, at least you should be. We did it back in the fall at school, called Casey at the Bat. And this is by Ernest Lawrence Thayer. Okay, so first thing we're going to take a look at are stanzas, a group of lines put together with a break. So there are 4 lines to this stanza, then a break. 4 lines to the second stanza, then a break, and so on, and so on, and so on. So we have stanza 1, stanza 2, stanza 3, stanza 4, and stanza 5. So now we know that this is not called a paragraph in poetry, it's called a stanza. And what I'm going to do, I'm going to show you just how easy it is just to go right back to the elements of poetry. So we've got this one covered. Check that off our list. We can recognize what a stanza is. So let's look at a line break. So I'm going to go back to slide 3. And this is when the sentence or when the line is finished. I don't want to say sentence because it's not a sentence because look, it ends with a semicolon. So this is the first line and then there's a break. Here's the second line and then there's a period. So this line and this line makes a sentence, but the author of the poem wrote it with line break, line break, line break, line break. And each single one is like that. Each stanza has that. Okay? So we're going to take a look at this again. This is the first line, ends with a semicolon. This is the second line, ends with a period. Third line, comma. different kind of punctuation, and then a period at the end of the fourth line. You will notice too that the author chose to make all of these beginnings capitals. That doesn't really follow the rules. And when you're talking about sentence structure. So that's what I want you to notice about the poems. They're written differently. They have a certain form that the author chooses to use. Okay. So now we're going to look at, if I go back to my slide 2, we're going to look at rhythm and rhyme. Rhythm and rhyme. So let's take a look. Rhyme. Let me just read this first stanza, and then we'll go back and talk about it. The outlook wasn't brilliant for the Mudville Nine that day. The score stood 4-2, with but one inning more to play. And when the Cooney died at first and Barrows did the same, a sickly silence fell upon the patrons of the game. Well, I hear rhyme, and I know you do too. And this is line 1 and 2 rhyme, line 3 and 4 rhyme. So this is day, play, same game. So this is an A, B pattern. A, B, rest, breast, A, that, bat, B, Blake, cake, A, sat, bat, B, so on. Okay, so Casey at the Bat is a long poem and it does have a rhythm. However, in the second stanza, it's pretty tough to get that 4-beat rhythm in. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to read the first stanza again and I'm going to clap it out and see what you think. The outlook wasn't brilliant for the Mudville Nine that day. That's 4. 4 beats to that first line. The score stood 4-2 with but one inning more to play. Let me do that one again. The score stood 4-2 with but one inning more to play. Yeah, there's the 4. And when the Cooney died at first and Barrows did the same, 4, a sickly silence fell upon the patrons of the game, 4. So I'm going to say, I think that this has a 4 pattern rhythm to it. 4 beats per line. Now, when we get up to here, this changes the story. This is tough. And I even went online and listened to it. So it should be read like this. A straggling few got up to go in deep despair. And because there's a period there, we're going to have a little break. The rest break because it's the end of the line. So let's try that again. The straggling few got up to go in deep despair. The rest clung to that hope which springs eternal in the human breast. Semicolon. Okay, again, it's pretty hard to get 4 in there, so let me try it. A straggling few got up to go in deep despair. The rest clung to the hope which springs eternal in the human breast. Okay, I didn't do a great job with that. So now my rhythm feels a little off, but let's go on to the next 2 lines. They thought if only Casey could get whack at that. That's 4, sorry. We'd put up even more money now with Casey at the bat. There's 4. But Flynn preceded Casey, as did also Jimmy Blake. There's 4. The former was a Lulu and the latter was a cake. There's 4. So upon the stricken multitude, grim melancholy set. There's 4. And there seemed to be but little chance of Casey's getting to the bat. Again, we had to kind of run that in to get that in. But I am going to go with this is a 4 rhythm lined poem. Okay? All right. So that was a good one. This is a tougher one to look at. All right. So we're going to go back to figurative language. And although this only has the first 5 stanzas and there's more in there, I'm going to point out a couple figurative languages, okay? So in stanza 1, the 3rd line, and when Cooney died at first, is a metaphor, gang. Remember, Cooney didn't actually die at first. It basically meant that he lost the base. He must have gotten the pitcher or the first baseman must have caught the ball and it was over for him. Okay. So that is a metaphor. And then we have a hyperbole in here. And let's see. It is in stanza 4, line 2. And Blake, the much despised, tore the cover off the ball. So Blake, team didn't really like him. The fans don't really like him. That's why the much despised is in there. He got up to bat and he tore the cover off the ball. He blew it further out into the outfield. He didn't literally tear the cover off the ball. Okay. So a hyperbole is saying he really hit that ball pretty far. And there was Jimmy safe at second and Flynn a hugging third. So they made it to third and second base. So that's kind of looking at some of the elements. I want to go back to my next slide again, and I want to look at mood. So let's go back to Casey at the bat. It's kind of funny. I think it's kind of funny. It's something we can all relate to. Everybody's seen a baseball game. Everybody's been to a baseball game. Some of you've played baseball, Little League baseball. So let's see if we can find some real words in here that describe the mood. A sickly silence fell upon the patrons of the game. So when Cooney went up and he struck out, and Barrows did the same. Here, this Mudville 9, these fans want this team to win, but now 2 have already struck out. So there's a sickly silence. And a struggling few got up to go in deep despair. So some of the fans got up and left. So we see how there's kind of this despair hanging over this baseball game, and their great hope, their hope in this is Casey's going to go up there. He's a good batter and he's going to hit that ball out of the park. Well, we all know how that ends. So this is my interpretation. You're all going to have your own interpretations too when you start reading poetry, is that it's a little gloomy, but there's some hope in that Casey can save this game. Okay, great. So now we're going to go to the very last slide. And here's what I want you to do today. I want you to go to this website. It's called Ken Nesbitt's, poetryforkids.com. Poetryforkids.com I've been using for many, many years. So if I click on that, it's going to take me right to Poetry for Kids. And I've got this thing about enrolling now. No, you don't want to do that. So we're going to click out of that. And then you can see on the screen that we want to go to poems. There are all kinds of poems we can look at. There are funny poems. So we look at cool kid poem links, explore other fun children's poetry websites. Okay, so let's just look right here at the funny poems. We're going to go into that, and you can see that there's about basketball. Good morning, dear students. I think I'm in love with my smartphone. Oh, what about this one? The principal is missing. Yesterday I took a test. So you can just go in. I want you to go in here into this website and look and read some poems. So we're going to get out of this. I'm going to go back up and click. And there's my slide again. So you're going to read several poems from this website. I want you to choose one poem in particular to examine, just like we examined Casey at the bat, and find the elements of that poem. Basically, what do you notice about the poem? Okay. When you've gone that, and you can, again, go back down here and you can go back to the slide and go back to, oh, these are the things Mrs. Gertz wants me to look for. So I want to notice these things. Back. And then what you're going to do is go to Google Classroom and fill out the document on Poetry Lesson 1. You can refer back to the lesson one slideshow as much as you need to. And just follow the directions in Google Classroom to fill out the document. And I'll have a list of directions there for you. So I hope you find this fun. And really what we're just doing is getting started. On Wednesday, we'll talk about a specific kind of poem and trying to build our own poem by ourselves. Okay. Thanks, boys and girls, for listening. This was kind of fun, kind of new for me too. So we will see you on Wednesday.